session. We have certain guidelines to be maintained regarding this presentation session. I have the names of all the participants here. Each participant will be getting only 4 minutes for the presentation, and I'm requesting all the participants to kindly switch on their videos so that it can be recorded for further purposes. And in order to make the session more interactive, I request all the participants, the 28 participants, the names of which I will be announcing in a short while. Kindly switch on your videos while you present. While you present. In the meanwhile, should I take out the names of the participants right away? Deepan sir,
please repeat.
Should I mention the names of the participants now?
Yeah.
Should I wait for the resource person to come?
Yeah, so that they can prepare themselves.
Right.
Please
All right.
the name. Okay.
Sure. The participants. I have the list of participants here. I would take out the names, each name now with the name of the institution and their state. First is Dr. Niaz Ahmed Ansari, Government Adarsh College, Umaria, Madhya Pradesh. Dr. Pranjit Saikia, Dumduma College, Assam. Dr. Ritumani Haloi, Karimganj College, Assam. Meghali Bhattacharya, Borhola College, Borhola, Jorhat. Shetrimaya Mailodi Devi, Tripura University, Tripura. Jintumoni Samua, Maskhwa Degree College, Assam. Dr. Prabhali Dole, Hendy Girls College, Guwahati. Dr. Arundhati Lahon, DCB Girls College, Assam. Dr. Ramesh Prasad Kol, Government RVPS PG College, Umaria, Madhya Pradesh. Mary Halam, Hendy Girls College, Guwahati, Assam. Ms. Rupjyoti Das, MTK Girls College, Dibrugarh, Assam. Ananda Chandra Ghosh, Kachar College, Silchar, Assam. Dr. Sandhya Kushwaha, RVPS Government College, Umaria, MP, Madhya Pradesh. Jatin Chandra Borwa, Moran Mohila Mahavidyalaya, Assam. Dr. Pallavi Saikia, Jajik HS College, Assam, HNS College, Assam. Dr. Arvind Shah Barkare, Government RVPS PG College, Umaria, Madhya Pradesh. Raja Dole, RG Barua College, Assam. Mrs. Runu Gokoi, Borhola College, Assam. Dr. Mousumi Hazarika, DHSK College, Assam. Dr. Jamanur Rahman, Mandia Anchalik College, Assam. Shumila Lama, University of North Bengal, West Bengal. Chandraprabha Devi Sahu, Maskhwa Degree College, Assam. Dr. Jonali Das, Dibru College, Assam. Tapati Datta, RG Barua College, Assam. Dr. Junti Borwa, Chandrakamal Besbarua College, Tiok. Vishwajit Bora, Melamora College, Golaghat. Simi Naz, Jaji Hemnath Sharma College, Assam. And the last participant is Sangita Fukon, GKV College, Tamulishinga, Jorhat, Assam. So these are the 9 names of the participants. I request everyone to kindly be ready with their presentations. We will begin in a short while, and I request all the participants once again to kindly switch on their videos while they present. It will be recorded for the purposes, so it will be extremely helpful for us to if you keep your videos on. Having said that, there is also a small announcement to make. I have been asked to make an announcement that the live membership drive of the CESR Guwahati is currently going on. So anybody who's interested for that can kindly contact the organizing secretary for this. The live membership drive is going on of the CESR. So anybody interested for this can contact the organizing members.
Okay, thank you, Suman. Thank you, Suman. Our research person has already joined with us. Yes, so now I would like to request Suman Das. Again, I'm telling you, assistant professor from Odisha College and a member of our committee, organizing committee, to initiate the session and introduce our resource person for this session. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Again, good evening to our resource person, Dr. Rubul Patgiri. He has joined us, and it is an honor for me to introduce him to all the participants here. Dr. Patgiri is an associate professor at the Department of Political Science, Guwahati University. He has done his MA in an MPhil from JNU and PhD from Dibrugarh University. He has taught postgraduate students in the Department of Political Science, Dibrugarh University from 2004 to 2016, and has been teaching postgraduate students in the Department of Political Science, Guwahati University from December 2016 till present. Dr. Patgiri has undertaken and completed a UGC-sponsored minor research project on ethnic demands and response of the state in post-colonial Assam during 2012 and 2013. He has co-authored in books such as Antarashtriya Hamparka and Gender Issues in Northeast India, Bridging the Gap. His research work includes papers such as Human Security Discourse and Security Concerns of Women in Northeast India in the International Journal of Humanities and Social Studies, Nationalist Project and Ethnic Response in Post-Colonial Assam in the Journal of Political Studies, and Locating Northeast in India's Neighborhood Policy, Transnational Solutions to the Problems of a Periphery in the Sage Publications, and many more. He has also, to his credit, a number of self-learning materials for distance education as well. Dr. Patgiri sir, I welcome you on behalf of the entire organizing committee to initiate the session and begin with the presentation session of the day. With that, I conclude. Thank you so much. Sir, over to you.
Thank you. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let me first congratulate the organizing committee for organizing a workshop on such a relevant topic. And I also thank the organizing committee for giving me the opportunity to be part of this exercise. And I really consider it as an honor on my part. Now, I know that time is limited and we have a huge number of participants. I think we have 28 participants today who will present. So without wasting much time, let us straight move into the business. And as per the instruction of the organizing committee, I think each participant will get 4 minutes to present. Am I correct?
Right, sir.
Yes.
Yeah, so I request each participant to present within the given time limit, and I think we can have a discussion if possible, if time permits, at the end of the presentation. So let me first then invite Dr. Niaz Ahmed Ansari. So I am going by the number of the list that has been presented to me. So can I so invite Dr. Niaz Ahmed Ansari from Government Undergraduate College, Maria, to make the presentation first.
Yes.
So thank you. Over to
Good evening, sir. Good evening, sir. सभी आयोजक मंडल को और हमारे रिसोर्स पर्संस और हमारे पार्टिसिपेंट्स के लिए जय हिंद। सर, मेरा टॉपिक है भारत में मानवाधिकार वर्तमान और भविष्य। मैं इसको राजनीतिक अधिकारों के मुद्दे पर बात करना चाहूंगा। कहने को तो जब से मानव ने जन्म लिया है तब से उसके साथ अधिकार और कर्तव्य रहे साथ में। अधिकार और कर्तव्य एक गाड़ी के 2 पहिए हैं। हमने ज्यादा फोकस किया है अधिकारों पर, इसकी वजह से हम कर्तव्यों में पीछे हो गए हैं कि किसी के पास अधिकार हैं और कोई कर्तव्य कर रहा है। तो हमें यहाँ हमारा जो मानवाधिकारों का भविष्य हो, हमें इस तरफ बैलेंस बनाने की बहुत आवश्यकता है। मैं दूसरी तरफ इशारा करना चाहूंगा कि कहने को हम 1215 से मैग्ना कार्टा के माध्यम से मानते हैं कि हमारा मानवाधिकारों का विकास हुआ धीरे धीरे। अभी ये विकासशील अवस्था में है और इस दिशा में बहुत सारा काम करने की जरूरत है। इस वर्कशॉप के माध्यम से मालूम हुआ कि अभी हमारे नॉर्थ ईस्ट के सिर्फ मिजोरम में ही मात्र राज्य मानवाधिकार आयोग की स्थापना हुई है। अभी मतलब वहां जो 6 स्टेट और हैं वहां अभी और इसकी स्थापित होने की आवश्यकता है। इससे स्पष्ट होता है कि हमारी सरकार मानवाधिकार। जी सर,
उत्तर नहीं कर सका बाहर सर को वही अंकल ने मुद्दा मार।
I'm requesting all the other participants to kindly mute their mics.
अभी हम देखते हैं कि अगर हम राजनीतिक अधिकारों की बात करते हैं, भारत में मुस्लिम जो अल्पसंख्यक है उनकी जनसंख्या 25 करोड़ के आसपास है और 25 करोड़ के लिए मात्र एक हमारा मिनिस्टर है, मोहम्मद मुख्तार नकवी। ये सोचने की बात है, 25 करोड़ के लिए एक, और जो छोटे छोटे हमारे इसमें 2 सिख हैं, 7 साल से ये स्थिति बनी हुई है। कई स्टेट्स ऐसे हैं, मैं मध्य प्रदेश की बात करना चाहूंगा। मध्य प्रदेश में पिछले 15 साल से कोई मुस्लिम ना तो विधायक हुआ है, एक विधायक मात्र नाम मात्र के हैं, अब वो विपक्षी पार्टी में है, तो ना उनको टिकट देने में ध्यान दिया जाता है। जब टिकट ही नहीं मिलेगा तो उनका जीतना कोई बात ही नहीं होती है। उसके बाद भी अगर चाहे तो उनको राज्यसभा के माध्यम से उनको दिया जा सकता है। ऐसे हमारे बहुत सारे और भी साथी लोग हैं, कुछ तो हैं प्रतिनिधित्व हैं, लेकिन वो डिसीजन मेकिंग में और पॉलिसी मेकिंग में उनका कोई रोल नहीं है। वो सिर्फ कोरम पूर्ति के लिए हमारे साथी हैं। बहुत सारे हमारे SC ST वर्ग के साथी हैं, वो MPs हैं, MLAs हैं, उनके पास बहुत मामूली मिनिस्ट्री होती हैं, डिपार्टमेंट होती हैं। हमें इस तरफ भी ध्यान देने की आवश्यकता है। जैसा कि महात्मा गांधी ने कहा है कि हर वर्ग, हर व्यक्ति अपनी अपनी ड्यूटीज को पूरा करे तो निश्चित है उसे अधिकार मिलेंगे। ये बात कहने में अच्छी लगती है, आइडियोलॉजी, लेकिन रियल में हम देखते हैं तो ऐसा सामने नहीं आता है। आप यदि अभी NRC की बात हो रही थी कि NRC ने बीजेपी पार्टी ने सिद्ध करना चाहा कि इस देश में कौन रहेगा कौन नहीं रहेगा। अब जब से कोविड-19 आया, अब ये मुश्किल हो गया कि अब कोई नहीं रहेगा, सब घर के अंदर रहेंगे। तो ये प्रकृति, नेचर अपना बैलेंस बनाती है। तो हमें ये देखने की जरूरत है, हमें वास्तव में जो हमारी ह्यूमन राइट्स हैं, हर कैटेगरी के, हर कास्ट के, हर एरियाज के, हम उसमें एक बैलेंस बना के चलें कि जो उनकी पॉपुलेशन है उसके हिसाब से उतनी सीट फिक्स की जाए, उतने उनके लिए टिकट दिए जाए। अभी हम देखते हैं हमारी बहनों को, महिलाओं को भी अभी 30% आरक्षण नहीं मिल पाया है। करने की जरूरत है। सर मेरा समय पूरा हो गया?
Yes, your time is over.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
So thank you. So now may I invite Dr. Pranjit Choikia from Dumduma College.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sir, am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are.
Sir, am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Respected Chairperson, sir, and my fellow participants. I'm going to say a few words on the cultural rights of indigenous people and human rights discourse. On this topic, I'll be preparing my paper, which is supposed to prepare for this the purpose of this workshop. So I'll say something what I have read till today, because this paper is still in developing stage. So I hope I could do justice to this topic. As you know that people who inhabited a land before it was conquered by colonial societies, who are considered themselves distinct from the societies currently governing those territories, are called indigenous people. So defining the term indigenous people, the United Nations Special Rapporteur to the Subcommission of Prevention of Discrimination and Protection of Minorities, Indigenous Communities, People and Nations says that those who are having historical continuity with pre-invasion and post-colonial societies that develop on their territories consider themselves distinct from other sectors of societies now prevailing in those territories or parts of them. They form at present non-dominant sectors of the society and are determined to preserve, develop and transmit to future future generations their ancestral territories and their ethnic identity as the basis of their continued existence as people in accordance with their own culture, patterns, social institutions and legal systems. So at present, globally, there are 300 to 500 million people are there who comes under this category. They embody and nurture 80% of world's culture and biological diversity and occupy 20% of world's land surface. The indigenous people of the world are very diverse, but the common thing among them is that they are extremely sufferers of various strong communities or those who are powerful communities, because these communities are being exploited by these powerful and strong communities. Even though United Nations International Convention on Civil and Political Rights and the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights states that people have right of self-determination by virtue which they freely determine their political status and freely pursue their economic and social cultural development. However, because there are some dispute over the exact meaning of the term people, it is not clear exactly to whom people refers. Now, without going much on these issues, I just come to the discussion that how their rights are at stake because of this continuous exploitation by the various strong and powerful communities. Despite international recognition and acceptance of Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which guarantees fundamental rights for all human beings, in practical fact, indigenous peoples' human rights remain under specifically designed safeguards. To this day, indigenous people continue to face serious threats to their basic existence due to systematic government policies. In many countries, indigenous people rank highest on such underdeveloped indicators as the portion of people in jail, the literacy rate, the unemployment rate, etc. They face discrimination in schools and yes, ma'am.
4 minutes is over, so you'll have to conclude, sir. We have to keep record of the time.
My time is over.
Yes, sir. Yes, it is. I'm extremely sorry for this,
Anyway,
but
anyway, just give me 30 seconds to wrap up my presentation. What I am trying to say is that even though there are international treaties and agreements, but yet the rights of indigenous people are not being protected because these agreements and these conventions are more legally binding agreements. These are, but it doesn't have much impact on state policies of various states, because states have every right to ratify these international conventions or agreements in their own way. Sometimes they drop some important articles or any provisions to suit their own interests, own set of interests of their states. So that's why the interest of indigenous people are right of indigenous people are not being fully protected yet. This is what my argument is. This is what my argument I'm going to put forward in my paper. Thank you so much for giving this opportunity to say a few words on this issue. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Saikia. Now I think we have Dr. Ritumani Haloi from Karimganj College.
Yes, sir. Sir, am I audible, sir?
Yes, you're audible.
So good evening, you all. So respected research person of this particular session, then all my esteemed colleague participants from different college and university. I am Dr. Ritumani Haloi from Karimganj College, Department of Economics. Actually, I am although a student of economics, but that topic that I have chosen today for my presentation is very much close to my heart. The title of my topic is the word security of women at workplaces. Security of women at workplaces is studied in a human rights perspective. So although I am a student of economics, all of you know that terms security and human rights are closely interrelated. So in a layman perspective, when we talk about the security, actually what happened, women call the freedom from any kind of fear. It is a security, freedom from any kind of fear. Similarly, in other words, we may call it actually what the absence of insecurity or threats may be called as well security. Absence of any kind of threats or insecurity actually. So there are lots of definitions out there regarding security. I am not going through details because of the time constraint. Similarly, just I have tried to incorporate the house security related to human rights. Generally, when it is human rights, it is only that kind of right which is inherent to the human body, that irrespective of the class, creed, gender, classes, etc. so on. So when a particular baby is born, right from the day one to till the death, he has the free rights to live freely with security and with dignity. At the same time, when I try to incorporate the concept of work in my papers, as I am trying to, you see, irrespective of gender, whether it is male or female worker, we have the free right to work freely or dignity in our day-to-day life. But at the same time, when you see about in the development process in a society, both the male and female counterpart has the equal role in the development society. But actually what will happen, but it has been observed over the years that actually what happened, the female workers who are engaged in different work activities, whether it is unorganized or organized or a housewife, they are being harassed at different times. They are being harassed directly or indirectly in different time and spaces. This is the main thing. And therefore, so again, this backdrop, just I want to make a study whether the women's works in a different organized sector, they are harassed. So generally, when we talk about the word harassment, so these are a very big component idea. So particularly what happened in my particular here, in my study, but actually what I have incorporated some points regarding harassment. So generally harassment may be of different forms, different natures. So generally when I try to define the harassment in my this particular study, so I have incorporated 5 important elements. What is the mental harassment? One is physical harassment, one is mental physical harassment, one is social harassment, one is financial harassment. So again, this doctor, I have started actually to make a study here. Actually, it is my ongoing unfinished work. So whatever I have the preliminary actually information, just I want to share before the August gathering. So actually what I find from the pilot survey is that actually those women who are work in the unorganized sectors and those women who are organized sector, the nature of harassment is something different. Especially those who work in the organized sector, they may be harassed in terms of mental, in terms of physical, in terms of mental physical, and in terms of financial also, because they have to look after all the families apart from their normal duties. This is the harassment. But while I have started to correlate this, but those women who are working in the unorganized sector, to some extent they are relaxed in some cases. But at the same time, what happened, so if you see the nature of harassment in the social harassment is there in both the organized sector as well as in the unorganized sector. But compared to the social harassment in organized and unorganized sector women's worker, it is relatively less in case of housewife worker. Similarly, when we talk about the financial harassment is definitely what happened. It is felt that those workers, those female workers who are engaged in the organized sectors or unorganized sector, they have the financial harassment. But at the same time, this is particularly less in case of housewife because they have their family health person or they have the husbands or any other family health persons that are there to look after all these things. So since it is actually one-way work, so it is not possible for us to wrap up each and everything. So actually, what happened for this purpose, I have surveyed actually not here. It's a pandemic situation going on in 2019 that I am using here. Since this is a ongoing project, so study paper for me.
Okay, your time is up. We'll have to conclude here.
This is actually so hopefully so by this time. So when I'll submit the full paper, then I'll be able to each and every findings in details. Thank you very much. This is from my side. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Haloy. So next we have Meghali Bhattacharya with us. She is from Borhola. She is from Borhola College. So I welcome Meghali Bhattacharya. Meghali Bhattacharya, are you there? Meghali Bhattacharya, are you there? So, in case Meghali Bhattacharya is not here or not available for presentation, then can we move to the next presentation?
Yes, sir.
Next presenter, that is Mayolodi Devi. She is research scholar from Tripura University. Mayolodi Devi, are you there? Okay, I think she is also not here at this moment. So in that case, I think we should move to the next presenter, and that is Jintumoni Samwa. Samwa is from Nakongsua Degree College, Assam. Maskwa Degree College. Maskwa Degree.
Good evening to respected resource person of this session, honorable all of members of and participants from Degree College, Dhemaji, Assam. The title of my paper, Women and Human Rights.
You are not audible. I think there is some problem with your audio connection.
Am I audible, sir? Sir?
Yes, yes. Now I can hear you.
Can I start my paper, sir? Right as something to which an individual has and rights. Universal Declaration of Human Rights contains as equal before law, protection against arbitrary arrest and detention, right to vote, right to social security, in these human rights are granted to enjoy and need to be protected by the Constitution of India. No one shall be subjected to finding of this study. Problem at maintain the continuity of the lineage. There is strong preference option in most of the classes in India. Numerous studies in Indian couples have reiterated this. The National Family Health Survey 1992-93 had also assessed on preference. The Hindu religion also places a high preference for sons. According to the Code of Manu, a man could by the protecting the life and power of his sons. A son is necessary for lighting the funeral pyre of the father, propitiating the souls of agnatic ascendants through Shraddha, and thereby enabling the father and agnatic ascendants to attain moksha. The rule of the woman is beget sons, purpose performance of ritual. In Hindu tradition, woman residence is transferred after marriage by the property laws. They are inheriting immovable property, since the property would pass to their husband family on marriage. Instead, women were given a portion of movable property like jewelry to take with them, known as dowry. This provides material reason for anxiety over the birth of the daughters. Number second, female poeticide. The low risk of girl infant whose incidence is higher in states like Bihar and Rajasthan. Rohtas-based doctor says, every day I have to turn away at least 3 patients who came to me and say, test corona hai. He looks nervously around him and whispers, just across the road from me is this gentleman who is raking in cash doing Panipot. They offer to tell you that sex of your child after 10 weeks pregnancy, even though it is a scientific fact that there is no discernible organ development at this stage. Number 3, female infanticide. In a grassroots Fisher network, a report was carried on fate of the girl child by Sophia Srika.
Time is over. You have to conclude. I'm extremely sorry for this, but the time is over.
Thank you. Thank you so much for giving me this few time. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Thank you, Samua. So next, I request Dr. Prabhali Dole from Henry Girls College.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Respected chairperson, members of the organizing committee, and all the participants present here. Myself, Prabhali Dole, from Department of Botany, Henry Girls College. Today, I am going to present on human rights and women. Human rights are the basic rights and freedoms that belong to every person in the world from birth until death. Human rights are standards that recognize and protect the dignity of all human beings. And women's rights are essential component of the human rights. But across the globe, many women and girls still face discrimination on the basis of sex and gender. Gender inequality underpins many problems which disproportionately affect women, such as domestic and sexual violence, lower pay, lack of access to education, and inadequate health care. This is the fact that men and women have very different experiences, and women often face gender-based discrimination that puts the woman at increased risk of poverty.
Ma'am, you're not audible right now.
Suman, please ask the participant not to switch on their mic unnecessarily because it disturbs us.
Yes, sir. I'm requesting all the participants to not switch on the mics while the presentations are on. Dr. Prabhali Dole, we are not able to hear you. Could you please? I think she has left already altogether. There's some issue probably, sir. Network issues might be some network issues. She has left.
Okay. So can we move to the next participant in that case?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So next we have Dr. Ramesh Prasad Kaul from Government RBPS PG College, Umaria. Is he there?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Good evening. Good evening, sir. Myself, Dr. Ramesh Prasad Kaul, Assistant Professor, Political Science, Government PG College, Umaria, MP. Sir, topic, human rights education in India, important present status and future action. Thank you, sir. And thank you very much to all the team of workshop, sir, who did this 7-day national workshop on that impact does human rights education have in India. All the issues were explained in detail, and we all got a chance to learn something new under the provisions of 1993. On 12 October 1993, Nation Human Rights Commission was establishment. India, the largest democracy in world, is a big country with a lot of human rights challenges. If human rights are violent in India, the largest democracy in the world, will be in danger for the set a democracy and sub-establish development in India. Human rights education in India is essential because knowledge of human rights in the best defense against their violence. The present paper highlights the importance of human rights education in India for effectively discharging the duty imposed on all India citizens by the various articles embodied in our constitution. The present paper focus on the initiatives taken by the educational organization in India like UGC, NCERT, NCTE, etc. for promoting human rights education in India and the challenges their organizations face in successfully completion of the great work. The paper concludes with some suggestive measures that should be taken as a part of educational programs for making education an effective tool for elimination of human rights violations. The human rights refer to all rights that are present in our existing society. Without human rights, one cannot live as human being in our existing society. Human rights are the basic right that a person, irrespective of race, caste, gender, creed, religion, or any other background, cannot be denied anywhere and are at any condition. Thank you very much so much.
Thank you so much, sir, for maintaining the time. I request all the participants to maintain the 4 minutes time. This is very, very important for all of us to maintain the time. Secondly, I ask all the students, participants once again, particularly I have been asked Jatin Borua sir and BK Nath sir to kindly switch off the speakers because it's disturbing all the other participants who are listening. Please switch off your microphones when you're not speaking. And the participants are requested to switch on their videos while they're present and maintain the time as well. These are the important notifications, point to note. Sir, I would request you to continue with the next.
Yeah.
Excuse me, sir. Sir, excuse me, myself, Prabhali Dole. I got disconnected actually, sir. Can I present?
Yeah. Please complete your presentation, please. You have 2 minutes.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, sir. Actually, but across the globe, many women and girls still face discrimination on the basis of sex and gender. And gender inequality underpins many problems with this proportionately affect women such as domestic and sexual violence, lower pay, lack of access to education, and inadequate health care. And this is the fact that men and women have very different experiences, and women often face gender-based discrimination that puts the women at increased risk of poverty, violence, poor health, and poor education. Aim of this paper is to conceptualize certain gender-specific violations as human rights violations. And equal rights of men and women are mentioned in preamble to the Charter of United Nations. And violations against women is which is considered as an obstacle to the achievement of the objectives of equality, development, and peace. And violations against women both violates and impairs or nullifies the enjoyment of women of human rights and fundamental freedoms. And domestic violence is one of the greatest obstacles to gender equality. It obstructs to women to secure their fundamental rights to equal protection under the law and the right to life and liberty. Domestic violence is violence that occurs within the private sphere, generally between individuals who are related through intimacy or through blood or through law. It can take the form of mental, physical, and sexual violence. Due to patriarchal structure of society, women have been relegated to a subordinate position, and a woman may be deprived of her human rights for the patriarchal society. And women are often treated as inferior, and this discrimination and neglect in childhood can initiate a lifelong downward spiral of deprivation and exclusion from the social mainstream. Therefore, initiatives should be taken to prepare girls to participate actively, effectively, and equally with boys at all levels of social, economic, cultural, and political leadership. And another issue is there, that is honor killing. Honor killing is a major issue which strictly nullifies the statement that women's rights are human rights. And this honor killing happens with regularity in some parts of India, mainly northern India. Though there was no nationwide data on the prevalence of honor killings in India, they quoted figures compiled by the India Democratic Women's Association. And one cannot hold gender equity unless women have treated equal to men in all aspects, including a share in the decision-making process in the family, as well as in the public sphere or society. With these few lines, I would conclude my presentation here. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Dole. I think next we have Dr. Arundhati Lahon from DCB Girls College. Is Lahon available? Is Dr. Arundhati Lahon available for presentation? Okay.
Probably not.
Okay. Then if she is not there, then let us move to Mary Halam. Mary Halam from Henry Girls College, Guwahati. Is Halam available for presentation? I think she is also not there.
I am audible,
In
sir.
that case, let us move.
Sir, am I audible?
Okay,
Yes.
okay. Please, yes. Yes, you are audible. You can.
Okay, good evening, sir. Respected chairperson, sir, and all my fellow participants. Today, I'm going to present a paper on issues of human rights in Northeast India, understanding from the backdrop of the Armed Forces Special Power Act, ASPA 1958. The part 3 of the Constitution of India has enumerated on the civil and political fundamental rights, and part 4 of the Constitution of India mentioned of the social and economic rights under the directive principle of state policy of India. But the Armed Forces Special Power Act, that is ASPA 1958, which is applicable to entire northeastern state, is found to be contradictory with the existing Constitution of India. Section 4 of ASPA stated that any commissioned officer, warrant officer, non-commissioned officer, or any other person of equivalent rank in the armed forces may, in a disturbed area, make arrest without warrant, fire upon or otherwise use force even to the causing of death, destroy any shelter from which armed attacks are made or are likely to be made or are attempted to be made, enter and search without warrant any premises, etc. This draconian law, which is still applicable to some northeastern states, needs to view seriously. So I'm trying to make an attempt to analyze some of the issues that is found to be in direct conflict with the fundamental rights and, for that matter, the human rights of northeastern region. Human rights are the basic rights and freedom that belong to every person in the world from birth until death. They apply regardless of where you are from, what you believe, or how you choose to live your life. It is the rights we have simply because we exist as human beings. They can never be taken away, although they can sometimes be restricted. For example, if a person breaks the law or in the interest of national security. In other words, human rights are those minimal rights which every individual must have against the state or other public authority by virtue of his being a member of the human family, irrespective of any other consideration. The concept of human rights is as old as the ancient doctrine of natural rights founded on natural law. However, the expression human rights is of recent origin, emerging after the end of the Second World War. The outcome of the Second World War had given rise to the serious concern towards humanity because humanity suffered a lot in this area. And as a consequence, tremendous developments have been made in the field of human rights. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted by the UN General Assembly in 1948, was the first legal document to set out the fundamental human rights to be universally protected. The Part 3 of the Indian Constitution, which mentioned about the fundamental rights, has emerged from the doctrine of natural rights. Fundamental rights are the modern name for what have been traditionally known as natural rights. However, as no right of freedom can be absolute, limitations have been imposed to its fundamental right in the interest of securing social justice. Enforcement of fundamental rights can even be suspended or prevented in emergency. The political and civil rights are enshrined in Part 3 of the Indian Constitution, that is Article 12 to 35 includes rights to equality, rights to freedom of speech and expression, freedom to assemble peacefully and without arms, to form association and union, to move freely throughout the country, to reside and settle in any parts of the territory of India, to practice any profession, rights to life and personal liberty, right to freedom or religion, cultural and educational rights, rights against exploitation, and rights to constitutional remedies. Social and economic rights under the directive principles of state policy, Article 3652, mention about the right to adequate means of livelihood, a right against economic exploitation, right to both sexes, to equal pay for equal work, right to work, right to leisure and rest, right to public assistance in case unemployment, old age, sickness, etc. Through this, 1 minute. ASPA is a special act which gives armed forces the power to maintain public order in disturbed areas. They have the authority to prohibit a gathering of 5 or more persons in an area, can use force or even open fire after giving due warning if they feel a person is in contravention of the law. If reasonable suspicion exists, the army can also arrest a person without a warrant, enter or search premises without a warrant, ban the possessions of firearms. Any person arrested or taken into custody may be handed over to the officer in charge of the nearest police station, along with the report detailing the circumstances that led to the arrest. A disturbed area is one which is declared by the notification under Section 3 of the ASPA. An area can be disturbed due to differences or
sorry
disputes.
to interrupt you, but the time's up. You have to wrap it up. Time is over.
Okay. There is no doubt, I will ramp up with 2-3 lines. There is no doubt that ASPA had been enacted with the objective of ensuring peace and tranquility in Northeast India. After India's independence, the region had faced political turmoil on account of various issues like ethnic conflict, insurgency, in the interstate boundary issue. So describing it as a lawless law during the parliamentary debate, Laisram Achau Singh, a member from Manipur, said that the ASPA would only harass innocent folk and deteriorate the situation. So the right to life is violated by Section 4A of the ASPA, which grants the armed forces power to shoot to kill in law enforcement situation without regard to international human rights law, restriction on the use of lethal force. So right to liberty and security of person is violated by Section 4C, which fails to protect against arbitrary arrest by allowing soldier to arrest anyone merely on suspicion that cognizable offense has already taken place or is likely to take place in the future. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alam. Now let us move to Ms. Subjyoti Das from MD Girls College, Dibrugarh. I welcome Rupjyoti Das.
Thank you, sir.
Please see there. Okay, please
Is I
carry
audible
on.
here, sir? Am I audible?
Yeah, you are. Yeah, you are audible. Please carry on.
Okay. Good evening to all the dignitaries of the organizing committee. A very good evening to respected Rubul sir. I'm very glad enough to hear your voice after such a long time. And all my fellow participants. Myself, I'm just from the Department of Political Science, Manohari Devi Kanoi Girls College, Dibrugarh. My topic of presentation is Women, Health and Human Rights, Some Reflections. So as we all know, health constitutes an integral part of a nation's agenda, besides being an important indicator of social development of the society. So based on the holistic paradigm of social development, health in general term implies the state of being free from illness or injury. As who has very vehemently here, they have defined health as a complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease and infirmity. Now, the health of the nation is very difficult to define in terms of a very single set of measures. At best, we can assess the health of a population by taking into account indicators like infant mortality rate, maternal mortality rate, life expectancy, nutrition, along with certain other instances of communicable and non-communicable diseases. Now, the health of a nation, it's not the product of only one section of the people, but rather we should also study health in terms of the women's health, because women, they actually approximately made the half of the population of the country, or or globally. So when I'm talking about this topic, I was setting my mind that gender really plays a very pivotal role in the dynamics of health of women, and women's health is often related to, or it has always been treated as women's reproductive health, but it connotes a very broader definition, better expresses the health of the woman. So though gender remains as an important social determinant of health, but conditions like poverty, education, economic background, the status of the woman, it differs from state to state and region to region. So the increasing focus and attention on the woman's health and rights can be seen with the initiatives of the government legislations and the statistics that witness a poor health scenario in the women's health sector. So my topic that has been women health and human rights, so it's a very broad issue. I tend to highlight some of the some reflections on the different kinds of legislations or the initiatives that has been taken by the government, national and international, in the national and international parlance, so that we can get an idea about what the legislation the states has been rendering to the woman, or to improve the status of the woman. Do they have really done good to the or impacted the woman's life or not? I will also try in my research paper to analyze some of the impact of the state in terms of in the international instruments like the CEDAW, this is one of the most important charter of the women's right. We can also go for other schemes just like the National Rural Health Scheme, on which there are so many of the provisions or so many of the important aspects or objective of the government. Then we can also go for the CEDAW. This is also one of the important charter. So we can also look from the angle of the constitutional provisions that has been provided in our constitution, or we can also go for other important provisions, international and national, so that we can do something justice to the women's health issue. So this particular standard of health mechanism, where I wanted to promote some kind of awareness or some kind of insight into the status of the woman in the health related issues. So in this particular paper, in the future, that I want to add some of the important things like do the culture or the government's mechanism, there has some kind of nexus between the public delivery services or not, whether the women are not been learned or the education has been there also there, or it has been become an obstacle in the lives of the woman. They basically for the rural woman, where the education, poverty, lack of awareness. Even if I am talking about the government schemes, not only the schemes should be transported, it should be communicated to the woman, to the part of the woman. Then we can also go for study about the availability of the advertisement, because in some of the cases we always find that there is not the accessibility or the communication process is not so sound or not so good, so that the process or the system or the schemes or the provisions that has been government given to the women, they may not be aware of that. And we have also been during my study, to an extent I have find that there's also the dearth of female doctors and dearth of female nurses in the area to whom the woman can regarding their health, they can express their opinions or any kind of problems they face regarding health. So in this issue, I want to carry out some of the analytical methods. So I will be using some kind of analysis so that I can do justice to my topic later on. So this is the end of my presentation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Das. Now, next, moving to Anand Ghosh from Kachar College, Silchar. So, Mr. Ghosh, are you there? In case Dr. Ghosh is not available, let us move to Dr. Sandhya Kushwaha, RVPS College, Umaria, Madhya Pradesh. Is Dr. Sandhya Kushwaha available for the presentation? Hello?
No, sir, I don't think so. She's there.
Okay. So then we have Jatin Chandra Borua from Moran Mahila Mahavidyalaya. Do we have Jatin Chandra Borua with us right now? Jatin Chandra Borua, is it here? I think he is also.
Jatin Borua is there, but it's muted. I mean, he's there.
Am I audible, sir?
Okay.
Hello, sir. Okay.
Yes,
sir.
you are audible.
So now I can begin, sir?
Yes, you can begin.
Okay, sir. Good evening to Honorable Chairperson, our resource person, and other respected participants of this session. Tea garden labor constitutes a large part of our labor force of the state, and among them, child labor is an important part. Therefore, I am going to present a paper on that subject. That is, so the name of my topic is Tea Garden, Child Labor, Violation of Human Rights, a case study of Dibrugarh district. The childs are employed in different activities, but all of them are not categorized as child labor. Child labor is defined as work that deprives children of their childhood, their potential, and their dignity, and that is harmful to physical and mental development. And that definition was given by ILO, International Labour Organization. That work, that means child labor, which is mentally, physically, socially, or or morally dangerous and harmful to children, it also interferes with their schooling. Child labor in the tea garden is a violation of human rights. It deprives the tea garden childs below the age of 15 years from proper schooling, proper physical, mental development. A large number of child have been employed in the tea gardens as labor, which means improper utilization of human resources. So this part of our resources should be diverted to the society's desired jobs. Now, in preparing this paper, its main objective is to raise the child labor problem in the tea gardens, especially Dibrugarh district of Assam, and to also find out the causes and also probable solutions from different points of view, and how to eradicate this problem. That will be the main aim of this paper. And in preparing this paper, methodology is completely descriptive, and to enrich our objectives, we are relying upon secondary data mainly. These data are collected from different sources like related books, journals, and websites. So at last, thanks to all. That's the end of my paper. Thanks to all.
Thank you. Thank you, Bolua. Next, we have Dr. Pallavi Soikia from Jaji College. Yes, you are audible. Yes, you are audible.
A very good evening to everyone. Esteemed colleagues, my topic of presentation is perception of rural women about constitutional rights. Now, India is a democratic country, and our Constitution of India offers different legal rights for the safety of women. These rights support women to protection and promotion of health, human dignity, equality, and liberty. Because of Constitution of India is the most important legal document of the country, they play a catalytic role towards achievement of transformational economic, environmental, and social changes compulsory for sustainable growth. But due to limited access to credit, healthcare, and education, they face challenges in every step of their life. Violence is a significant problem all over the world, which harmfully disturbs the health and safety of millions of women throughout their lifespan. It has been also observed that rural women are all better risks of experiencing multiple forms of violence and harmful practices because violence can occur in home, place of work, or in public places. Hence, the study will be conducted with an objective to assess the perception level of rural women about constitutional rights. This is the main objectives of the topic, and with a few lines, I conclude my presentation. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Soikia. So, let us then move to the next participant, that is Dr. Arvind Shah Barkade, faculty member, Government VPS PG College, Umaria, Madhya Pradesh. Is Dr. Arvind there? I think we do not have him right now with us. So let us move to the next presenter, that is Raja Dole from RG Borua College, Guwahati, Assam. Is Mr. Dole available? Can we have Dole with us? Okay, Dole is not there right now. So the next is Runu Gogoi from Borhala College. Do we have Runu Gogoi with us? Runugoi, are you there? I don't think so. So let us move to then Mousami Hazarika from DHSK College. Dr. Mousami Hazarika. Is he there? Is she there?
Yes, sir, I'm here.
Okay, please.
Respected chairperson, respected participants, now I am going to present my paper entitled Gandhian Approach to Human Rights and its Relevance. As a rational being, human beings possess certain basic and inalienable rights. Human rights are those rights which are essential for the protection and maintenance of the dignity of individuals and create conditions in which every human being can develop his personality to the fullest extent. The struggle to protect and preserve human rights is as old as human civilization itself. Throughout the century, millions of people have been struggling for the preservation of human rights. Among them, M.K. Gandhi was an ideal figure who made personal sacrifice for others and teaches us sincerity and love of humanity throughout his life. This can be regarded as the means for preservation of human rights. The main objective of my paper is to discuss human rights from Gandhian perspective, as well as the relevance of Gandhian approach in the present scenario. Though Gandhi was not a participant in the session of the Human Rights Commission of the United Nations or in the General Assembly sessions, but by 1940, he had become an internationally well-known figure, and the impact on his words and ideas was felt all over the world. His efforts and arguments to promote and defend human rights were widely known. Gandhi was asked by Julian Huxley, the Director General of UNESCO, to give opinion concerning the project of Universal Declaration of Human Rights. He disclosed that he had learned one precious thing from his illiterate but wise mother, that is the right from duties well performed. The right of one person invokes the obligation to, of others to recognize and respect it. Article 29 of the Universal Declaration refers to duties. Everyone has duties to the community, in which alone the free and the full development of his personality possible. There were different types of humanism that influences the Commission of Human Rights. Gandhi stood for the ideal of brotherhood of all the humanity. His life was spent to carry on the mission of human brotherhood based on the equality of all men and women as God's children. The first article on the Universal Declaration reflects exactly what Gandhi stood and wanted for. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and consciousness and so should act towards one another in of this clearly reveals the influence of Gandhi on Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The essence of what is to be human is expressed clearly in the life and the action of Mahatma Gandhi. If we come across his whole philosophy, then we find that his entire philosophy is rooted on the welfare of whole mankind. As we know that every human on this earth has the right to live in peace. To him, the pursuit of these human rights, the only hope for the human was for every one of us to become non-violent. Gandhi was always ready to challenge the conditions which destroyed peace in life. He wanted to uplift all human beings and tried to protect them from the various socio-political and economic evils. His idea of Sarvodaya means welfare of all is very much connected with the modern human rights and humanity. The globalization of commodity markets does not bring humanity close to peace and justice. Rather, it may result in hostile competition to will lead to violence. So, Gandhi the structural violence under which much poor people were oppressing around the world. Thus, Gandhi was very much concerned to save the humanity from violence and injustice. Gandhi's method of non-violence is the precious gift for saving humanity. According to him, to be human, one must be non-violent.
We know that the most important threat for humanity is violence, rather created by religious fundamentalists or by nuclear weapons. Under such a vulnerable situation, Gandhian non-violence is one of the best solutions to protect. Gandhi always fought without weapons. He was able to get victory in the different fields. To him, non-violence is the force of active love and truth, which is justice and peace for every human being. We know that the direct requirement of today is establishing global peace, and this will
I'm
be
sorry to
possible.
interrupt you, ma'am. I'm requesting Dr. Sandhya Kushwaha to kindly mute her mic. It's very disturbing. We can't hear Mousami Hazarika speaking. Kindly mute your mic. Dr. Sandhya Kushwaha, kindly mute your mic. Ma'am, you can continue.
Okay. We know that the direct requirement of today is establishing global peace, and this will be possible only through Gandhian non-violence. According to him, non-violence is a force more powerful than any weapons in the world. Besides this, there are a number of methods given by Gandhi for saving the human rights from poverty, unemployment, and economic disparity, such as decentralization, village industry, and spinning wheel. As we know that the world today, under the system of globalization, made both positive and negative effects. As far as concerned with negative effects, it creates a lot of poverty, hunger, unemployment, and economic disparity. Gandhi was a great supporter of decentralization at grassroots levels. To him, the village should have their development, production, and administration. He wants to uplift the poor people who live in a place so that in India, we have the system of Panchayati Raj. Because of this great concern for poor people, he gave more emphasis on village industries like spinning wheel and the khadi, etc. So that the rural people will be able to uplift their basic needs. Due to rapid flow of the industrialization that destroys the village industry, and millions of people will become unemployed, and it creates a great economic disparity between rich and poor. Therefore, Gandhi said, anything that million can do together becomes changed with unique power. At the conclusion, I can say that the Gandhian methods of non-violence, decentralization, and village industry are very much relevant in the era of globalization in order to save and protect the human rights and humanity. It's only through his system of non-violence the individual will be able to save their life from the violence. The day has come to implement the Gandhian philosophy to bring global peace, which become a great concern for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mousami Hazarika. So let us have now Dr. Jamanur Rahman from Mandya Anshalik College.
Yes, sir, I am here.
So Dr. Rahman, yeah,
yes.
Please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Jamanur Rahman, Assistant Professor, Mandya Anshalik College, Department of Political Science. Respected resource persons and respected dear participants, my topic is domestic violence and human rights. Domestic violence is an abuse of power. Domestic violence occurs when one person attempts to physically and psychologically dominate and control another person's. Domestic violence is a human rights violence. While domestic violence is often treated as a private matter, the human rights framework provides a tool to challenge this perception and reform it as collective problems that society as a whole must address. Human rights are basic rights and freedoms that all people in the world are entitled to have, regardless of their sex, religion, nationality, race, or language. Many international agreements, such as Universal Declarations of Human Rights, contain the human rights standards and customs agreed to by the nations of the world. International human rights law requires that government take effective measures to prevent and respond to prevent, investigate, punish, and remedy domestic violence. Human rights laws also impose specific obligations around how particular authorities, for example, police, prosecutors, legislators, and housing authorities, respond to individual cases of domestic and family violence. The concept of human rights evolved largely from ideas of Western political theory about rights of individuals to autonomy and freedom. Thus, the international human rights law evolved to protect individuals' autonomy, vice versa. The state and it had states responsible for individual rights and accountable for abuse of those rights. The development of human rights has been expressed in terms of generation, the civil and political rights as the first generation's rights, economic, social, and cultural rights as the second generation's rights, and the group of people's rights, which are recently defined as the third generation's rights. It is an unfortunate legacy of the practical structures upon which human rights law has been built that issue pertaining primarily to women, such as domestic violence, contain to struggle for recognition within global human rights bodies and agenda. Thank you, sir.
Continue.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Rahman. So now I request Sumila Lama to present her paper. Sumila Lama from University of North Bengal.
Yes, sir, I'm there. So first of all, very good evening to one and all
audible.
present here. Yes, sir. So first of all, a very good evening to one and all present here, respected resource person, members of the organizing committee, and learned professors and research scholars from different universities and colleges across the country. I'm Chumila Lama, and I am a PhD research scholar in the Department of Political Science, University of North Bengal. The topic that I'm going to present today is marriage and human rights in India. My paper tries to understand the different ways and the extent to which the right to marriage is violated in India. The paper also tries to understand the different reasons behind the violation of this right. And in addition, my paper also tries to highlight the various measures that have been undertaken by the Indian state in order to stop the violation of the right to marry of the two consenting adults in India. So because this paper is a work in progress, in this presentation, I'll be basically discussing about the few ways in which the right to marriage is violated in India. The right to marriage and to found a family is a universal right of each and every human being. And this right is also stated under Human Rights Charter within the meaning of the right to start a family. Article 16 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights states that men and women of full age without any limitation due to race, nationality, or religion have the right to marry and to found a family. They are entitled to equal rights as to marriage, during marriage, and at its dissolution. But it is stated that marriage shall be entered into only with the free and full consent of the intending spouses. And because the family is the natural and fundamental group unit of society, it is entitled to protection by society and the state. The Constitution of India also recognizes the right to marry as a fundamental right under Article 21, that is right to life. And various courts across the country have interpreted that right to marry is an integral part of the right to life under Article 21. The Special Marriage Act 1954 and the Prohibition of Child Marriage Act 2006 prescribes 18 and 21 years as the minimum age of consent for marriage for men and women respectively. Thus, if a girl who is 18 years old and above, and if a boy who is 21 years old and above, if they want to marry each other, then it is the legal right to do so. But despite being a fundamental right and a basic human right, the right to marry of the two adults with the free and full consent is often violated in India. And there are two major ways in which this right to marry is violated in India. Number one, by forcing the individual to marry without his or her consent. And number two, by not allowing the two consenting adults to marry according to their choice. A forced marriage is illegal in different personal laws and marriage in India, with the right to marry recognized under the Hindu laws as well as Muslim laws. But still, there are many cases in India in which individuals are forced to marry against his or her will. And this pressure to marry against will can take place in many ways. It can take the form of physical as well as sexual abuse. It can also be emotional and psychological. For example, if a person denies to marry against his or her consent, then they are told that you are letting the family down, or they are being told that you are not a good daughter or not a good son. So in this way, a person is forced to marry without his or her consent. And in the second case, when the person is not allowed to marry according to their choice, because in our Indian society, marriage among different communities, caste, religion, race, etc., are generally not accepted. So if a person tries to violate this societal norm, then they are often punished. And this punishment takes the form of not only physical and mental abuse, but it has also led to the death of some person. So I would like to cite example that is very much prevalent in our Indian society today. That is, this violation of right to marry takes place in the name of love jihad. Love jihad is basically an idea which believes that Muslim men targets Hindu women for conversion to Islam by means of feigning love or marriage. Therefore, when the two adults belonging to different religious communities or belonging to different faiths, Hindus and Muslims, and if they want to marry each other, they are prohibited. And even if they're married, they are forcefully separated from each other. And this is a major violation of human rights in India. So it is high time that we as a human being realize and understand and stop the violation of human rights of another human being to marry according to their choice. With this, I'd like to conclude my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lama. So next we have Sandraprabha Devi Chahu from Moscow Degree College. Sandraprabha Devi Chahu. Is Sandraprabha Devi there?
Yes, sure, she's there.
Okay, I think. Okay.
She's there, but
Please
it's inaudible.
proceed.
Yes, sir. I'm audible.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Am I audible? Yes, sir. I'm audible.
Yes, you are audible. Yes, you are audible. Go ahead, please.
Am I audible? Hello? Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, sir. Good afternoon, respected resource person of this system.
I think there is some network issue at her end.
She has muted her microphone. Dr. Sandhya Kushwaha, we request you to kindly mute your mic.
Hello. Dr. Sandhya Kushwaha.
Ma'am, we request you to kindly mute your mic.
Okay. सभी पार्टिसिपेंट को मेरा धन.
Ma'am, you will be given a chance to speak, but then at the end of the presentation, because right now we are in the middle of a session, so we will be given a chance to speak, but at the end of it. So kindly mute your mic now.
जी.
Yeah.
So in that case, can we have Dr. Jonali Das from Dibru College?
Yes, sir.
Since you have lost, yeah. Dr. Jonali Das, if you are there,
Yes,
please.
sir. Yes, sir. I am here. Hello. Am I audible?
Yes, please.
Yes, sir.
Please present. Yeah.
Respected research persons, sir, and organizing members of the organizing committee and all the participants. Good evening. I am going to present my paper. Actually, it's not completed now, but I will complete it within 4 minutes. My topic is violence against elderly in India during COVID-19. Since 2020, many countries around the world have been implementing lockdowns, stay at home and physical distancing measures to contain the spread of COVID-19. The home, however, is not always always a safest place for 3 categories of human beings. For example, children, women, and older people. Although all the cases of violence are not registered and most of the cases are unnoticed, but it has been increased during the period of lockdown. Israel Foundation, a civil society organization of India, conducted a survey through its volunteers between June 1 to June 12 in 2020 and published a data of cases of elderly abuse. Responses of 5,000 elderly people in different parts of the countries, including the metro cities like Delhi, Mumbai, Kolkata, and Chennai. Himanshu Raj, chairman of Israel Foundation, said that during this period of COVID-19, a negative atmosphere around older person. Older people are not only facing social restriction, but also family restriction. Cases of violence and abuse against elderly are a major problem.
Ma'am, I have to interrupt you in the middle. I'm sorry for this. I'm requesting everyone once again, please mute your mics while the speaker is speaking. It's very difficult for us to understand otherwise. Dr. Sandhya Kushwaha, you have been warned again and again. Kindly mute your mic because it's very difficult otherwise to listen, or else you'll be removed from the group. I'm extremely sorry for this inconvenience, but you'll be removed from the group if you do not mute your mic.
Can
you can
proceed?
speak now. Yes.
Okay. Older people are not only facing social restriction, but also family restriction. Cases of violence and abuse against elderly are a major problem, not only in India, across the world. They are regarded as most vulnerable category of society. Security of the elderly people is not an old concept in our society. Most of the developing countries like India, they lived a happy life. But nowadays, the scenario has been in change. It seems that in spite of having lots of policies and programs and laws, the cases of abuse of elderly are increasing day by day. Therefore, to giving a prosperous, secure, and happy life to this marginalized group, various international and national measures are being taken. Indian government itself has also introduced lots of policies. Policies like National Policy of Older Person, Old Age Pension, Annapurna Yojana, Parents Maintenance and Welfare Act, Welfare of Citizens, Senior Citizens Act 2007 for the security of the elderly people. But the problems of elderly are increasing day by day. Assam is not beyond that. And we have know about the old age home. And various news are coming up nowadays about regarding old age home. Old age home a new concept in India, but due to the cases of abuse against elderly, this institutions has come up. All of we know about the United Declaration of Human Rights, which was taken in 1948. The UDHR has entitled human rights to each and everyone as a human being older people of all over the world have entitled the same kind of rights as the other are being enjoyed. But the rights of the elderly are being violated within and outside their home, and it's a global problem. Therefore, the international community started to highlight the situation of older person in the Vienna International Plan of Action on Aging, adopted at the World Assembly on Aging in 1982. The 1991 United Nations Principles for Older Persons, the 1992 Global Targets on Aging for the year 2001, and the 1992 Proclamation on Aging further advanced international understanding of essential requirements for the well-being of older people. All these are taken. The political declaration and the Madrid International Plan of Action on Aging 2002 adopted at the Second World Assembly on Aging, and it was endorsed by the General Assembly of UN in its resolution 57. In 2011, for the first time, the report of the Secretary General to the General Assembly focuses on the human rights of older persons. The report further stresses the, several key areas for responses to the challenges as strengthening the international protection regime and elimination of financial exploitation and employment discrimination, establishing adequate care facilities, and participation in political life. Some governments, particularly in recent years, have begun to address the need to afford special protection to older persons. For example, by recognizing in their constitution the principle of equality and non-discrimination, by introducing laws and policies that address age-related discrimination in employment, and by reforming pensions to offer broader coverage. Indian Constitution has also the Article 14, 14, 21, 17, etc. In spite of these articles, and in spite of having lots of policies programs, cases of abuses are going on. And my paper will be completed. The main objective of my paper is to the implementation of the policies and programs regarding elderly people and the cases of violences against the elderly people. With this, I would like to sum up my paper. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Dr. Sandhya Kushwaha, can you hear me? Dr. Sandhya Kushwaha, can you hear me?
Yes.
Ma'am, I am requesting you again, kindly mute your mic.
जी क्या मैडम मैं हिंदी में बोल सकती हूँ?
मैम, आपको म्यूट करने के लिए कहा गया है, बार बार बताया जा रहा है, आप म्यूट कीजिए अपना माइक. इट्स वेरी डिफिकल्ट अदरवाइज टू लिसन. आप म्यूट कीजिए, जब आपका समय आएगा हम आपको बता देंगे, आप यू कैन प्रोसीड विथ योर प्रेजेंटेशन. फिलहाल के लिए आप म्यूट कीजिए अपना माइक.
जी ओके मैम.
Yes, Chandraprabha Sahu, can I present again?
You haven't done it yet, ma'am. आपने अभी तक अपना माइक म्यूट नहीं किया है. I'm extremely sorry for this inconvenience. Yeah.
Can I present again?
Sir, over to you. I'm sorry for the inconvenience.
Hello.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
It's fine.
Yes, Chandraprabha Devi Sahu. Can I present?
Yes.
again?
Please go ahead. Yes.
Hello.
Yes, finish your presentation. Yes.
Sir. Okay. Good afternoon, respected resource person of this session and all fellow participants. Today I am going to present a paper on role of a teacher education for the better implementation of human rights education. Human rights education is a never-ending process which must be part of lifelong learning opportunities for all citizens in all. The ultimate goal is to form attitudes and provide knowledge which lead to good practices of human rights of all. Human rights education contributes to improving the effectiveness of the education system as a whole, which in turn contributes to a country's economic, social, and political development by providing improvement of quality of learning achievements of promoting self-centered and participating teaching and learning practices and process, as well as a new rule of the professional preparation of teachers. It is not merely training of teachers, it is a specialized type of activity designed to equip the prospective teachers with insight, knowledge, attitude, and skills. It is that knowledge, skills, and ability which is relevant to the life of teacher as teacher. Increasingly, human rights education is viewed as a way to bring coherence to a fragmented and globalized world. Human rights education promotes respect for human rights of all individuals. In this field, the role of teacher education is very significant. So in this regard, the aim of the paper is to understand the role of teacher education for better implementation of human rights education through proper aware and consciousness. So in this paper, I'm going to use descriptive method, which provides a method of analytical study. As secondary data, we have collected from various sources like research article, book, review studies, internet thesis, journal, etc. At the end of in this paper, I'm going to find that education is a fundamental human right and essential for the exercise of all other human rights. It promotes individual freedom and empowerment and yields important development benefits. It is a powerful tool by which economically and socially marginalized adults and children can lift themselves out of poverty and participate fully as citizens. So in this field, teacher education can play a significant role. Though teacher education can be better implementation of human rights education. Therefore, for a better implementation of human rights education, teachers are more aware as well as conscious to future brightness of the child. Thus, in turn, the teachers would be able to address the issue of human rights and imparting the same to the young children in the school much more systematically and effectively. Perhaps in the same context, it would also address the issue of providing the sensitivity training or sensitizing the young children towards the issue of human rights in more practical manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Prabhat Sahu. So now next we have Dr. Tapati Dr. Tapati Dr. from Artua College.
Good evening.
Good evening. Please.
Respected chairperson, sir, and all of my fellow friends. My today's topic of presentation is environment and human rights. During the last century, research has been increasingly drawn towards understanding the human nature relationship and has revealed the many ways humans are linked with the natural environment. A safe, clean, healthy, and sustainable environment is integral to the full enjoyment of a wide range human rights, including to life, health, food, water, etc. Without healthy environment, we are unable to fulfill our aspirations. Therefore, the importance of the environment to the fulfillment of human rights is widely accepted at international law. One of the greatest present threats to content human existence comes from the deterioration of the human environment. Technological hazard upsets the ecological balance of water, earth, and air, and may eventually make our plant uninheritable or the human extinct. For these reasons, a new human right to a safe, healthy, and ecologically balanced environment must be established. The idea of environment as a human right first emerged in the international arena in 1968 when the General Assembly of the United Nations recognized that technological changes could threaten the fundamental rights of human beings. In 1969, the United Nations General Assembly adopted a declaration on progress and development in the social arena, which explored the interdependency between the protection of the environment and human rights. The United Nations formally recognized the right to a clean environment for the first time in 1972. In June 1972, the UN conference held on Stockholm on the human environment proclaimed the principle that the man has the fundamental rights to freedom, equality, and adequate conditions of life in an environment of equality that permits a life of dignity and well-being. And he bears solemn responsibility to protect and improve the environment for present and future generations. This declaration on the human environment may be considered as the beginning of environmental movement in the world. After this United Nations Environment Program set up, after here we may mention the 1992 in Rio de Janeiro, an environmental conference, World Summit on Sustainable Development 2002, United Nations General Assembly Summit 2010, etc. In our India also, chapter and fundamental duties of Indian Constitution inspire duties on citizens to protect the environment. After the UN Stockholm Conference 1972, there has been much hard work to protect and improve the environment globally, nationally, and locally. There has been much progress, but it is clear that in all parts of the world, our environment is under threat, and that many problems are becoming more serious. The main reasons of this are fail to place constants on national strategies that may lead to unsustainable growth, fail to ensure the implementation of national framework laws and enforcement strategies such as national environmental action plans, fail to control state resource use and damaged integrational equality, increasingly reveals the inadequacy of funding by those agencies which fund strictly environment work that does not consider socio-economic factors. It is said that where there is a right, there is a duty, and it is the right of a human to use environment for their. Yes.
Dr. I think you have exhausted your time, so please wind up.
Yes, sir.
I think you have exhausted your time. Please wind up. Please wind up.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Next, we have Dr. Junti Borua from Chandra Kamal Velpura College, Tiok.
Hello, am I audible, sir?
Yes, yes, you are audible.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, respected resource person, sir, and my fellow participants. The title of my paper is Subversion of Patriarchal Authority and Quest for Women Rights, reading Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre. So the Victorian society, with its conservative gender roles, placed women within the home with few rights and privileges. The society expected women to be dutiful wives and mother, to practice restraint and be always ready to sacrifice her rights and comfort for others. Charlotte Bronte's novel, Jane Eyre, questions these traditional images of women, which is expected in a male-oriented world. Throughout her pursuit of equality and independence, Jane Eyre looks beyond the patriarchal images of women as a submissive angel. Largely because of her gender and her lack of an independent source of income or wealth, Jane Eyre had to face considerable struggle to survive. Like many other women during her time, Jane was economically devalued and she was also socially marginalized. Moreover, she lived in such a society which provided her few options for earning a living. Jane Eyre, in the novel Jane Eyre, Charlotte Bronte reflects the certain contradictions of Victorian society. First of all, it was a society that was in transition. On the one hand, there was a struggle for women's rights, struggle for women's rights for freedom, rights to establish her position and identity in a male-oriented society, male-oriented world. At the same time, the society also exalted the traditional concept of women. It means the self-sacrificing image of women was exalted. So this is one of the contradictions, and I would like to analyze these contradictions in my paper. That on the one hand, there were struggles for freedom, struggles for autonomy, struggles for liberty. On the other hand, there are some women, the society which exalted the self-sacrificing woman, the traditional woman, the traditional images, the docile, the meek women, dutiful wives, dutiful mother. These traditional concepts were exalted. So many other women of her time, Jane Eyre was economically devalued and she was also socially marginalized. So on the one hand, as she was a woman, gender was one of her hindrances. The first is hindrance for Jane Eyre was her gender. On the other hand, she did not have an independent source of wealth. So Charlotte Bronte in this novel shows how economic freedom or independence, economic independence is necessary for someone's identity, for someone's position in a society. So living in a society in which she has few options for living, earning a living, and in which women are considered inferior to men, Jane faces a considerable struggle to survive psychologically and physically. So another thing, important thing is that Jane Eyre, from her childhood onwards, she was a different type of a girl. She was quite different from others because she was not at all influenced by the fairy tales. The fairy tales, which usually idealizes marriages and the usual fate of the fairy tale heroine, she was not at all impressed by all these things. She was different and she was determined not to become a passive fairy tale heroine. Okay, but she was interested in the masculine life of independence, the masculine life of independence. And But during her time, it was very difficult. In the practical world, it was very difficult to establish her identity and position. So another important thing I would like to...
Dr. Borua, I think you have nearly exhausted your time. So please sum up in 1 minute.
Okay. So one thing I would like to say that another important character in the novel is Bertha Mason. Bertha Mason, she was Rochester's first wife. She was mentally sick. She was kept in a dark room, and I would like to analyze in my paper that there are two women characters. One woman is confined in a dark room, and the other woman, Jane Eyre, for her independence in a society. So my paper will also focus a comparison between these two characters, Jane Eyre and Bertha Mason. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Borua. Next, we have Biswajit Bora from Melamara College, Golaghat. Biswajit Bora. Bora, are you there? Mr. Biswajit Bora. In case Bora is not available, then can we move to Seema Nath from Jaji College? Hello. Do you have Seema Nath from Jaji College?
Am I audible, sir?
You are?
Hello?
Seema Nath, yes. You are Seema Nath. You are?
Yes, sir. I'm Seema Nath.
Okay. Please go ahead.
Okay, sir. A very good evening to all. Respected resource persons, sir. Respected organizers. Respected co-participants. Myself, Seema Nath, Assistant Professor from Jaji Hemnath Sharma College. I am going to present my seminar paper on the topic Voice of Rights and Freedom of Women, an analysis of Kamala Das's poems and introduction and My Grandmother's House. One of the prominent writers of India of modern times, Kamala Das, whose poetry is basically a protest in a patriarchal society, has always been subjected. Her poetry deals with her unhappy childhood and unhappy married life, which did not allow her to lead a life as she wanted. Kamala Das never conformed to family. The poem and introduction deals with the sufferings of a girl child in a male-dominated society. It portrays the misery of an average Indian girl who is forced to marry a person who was much older her and whom she would get married, as girl children are considered as burden to the family. She considered the lovemaking of her husband as torturous to her body and her soul. The poet was fond of the English language, which she revealed her dreams. But he was fed up by the restrictions posed by the domination of patriarchy. She used the word they to mean the members of the family and society who were conservative and patriarchal. They represent the traditional and the patriarchal domination of any social framework where the women have little freedom to voice their views against them. In one stanza of the poem, she says, dress in saris, be a quarreler with servants. In this stanza, we see that she has tried to show how the fate of a woman is confined to be a girl, a domestic wife, a cook, and a quarreler. The woman is prevented from sitting on the walls and peeping inside the wall, and the little activities in the other social, spiritual, and political affairs. In another poem, the next in My Grandmother's House, she has mentioned about her grandmother's home, which is now far away from what and everyone. Now her grandmother has died, and the house is filled with grief. Only dead silence haunts over it. The poet here shows the ironical contrast between the past and the present. Her present life is a tormenting one, whereas even the darkness of the grandmother's house does not horrify her. So the poet becomes nostalgic when she recollects the happy memories of the grandmother's house and says she would be free to pick up a handful of darkness from there.
Simanath,
Yes, sir.
please can you sum up your presentation?
So now, in this way, the house symbolizes a cradle of love and joy and freedom. Her yearning for it symbolizes her retreat to a world of innocence, purity, and simplicity. So this is my presentation. Thank you, sir. Thank you all.
Thank you. Next, we have Sangita Fukan from GKB College, Tamulji Singha, Jorhat. Do we have Sangita Fukan with us? Sangita Fukan, are you there? So I think, do we have anyone else left? Is there anyone
Should we give a chance to the people who are absent?
who wants to present? Sorry. Sorry. You are not audible. I am not being able to hear you.
Sir, I'm saying that should we give a chance to the people who are absent before, if they want to present now?
Yes, 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 definitely. Please, please. So, who are the people now available with us who missed their presentation? So we had Meghali Bhattacharya who could not present. Then Mailodi Devi. Do we have them with us? Then we had Ananda Chandra Ghosh. Then Sandhya Kushwaha. I think Kushwaha was there. If she wants to make the presentation, she can. Kushwaha, Dr. Sandhya Kushwaha. Can we request her?
Dr. Sandhya Kushwaha, are you there?
Can we request? Yeah.
Dr. Sandhya Kushwaha, if you are there, you're asked to present the paper if you have it with you. Kushwaha ji, aap hai wahan pe?
I think she is not there. Then is there anyone left? So if please raise your hand or please come forward if someone was left and who intend to make the presentation. If there is none, then I think we have come to the end of the session. And I think I congratulate all the participants for covering so many important issues or areas associated with human rights. And I understand the time was very limited. Within 4 minutes, it was very difficult to put forward the argument. But I assume I think those points or issues which were raised during the presentation would be developed further in their seminar paper. So I think it has been a learning experience for all of us, and with this I wish all of them a productive engagement with the workshop. And thanking again, I think we can declare the session as over. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. It was an honor to have you with us. Thank you for spending so much of time for the session. since it's crucial for all of the presenters, because this is going to be assessed at the end of your the completion of your workshop. Sir has been giving marks for the session for the part for the presentation that the participants have just made. We saw a lot of participants speaking on diverse topics, and it was really encouraging and enlightening for all of us to listen. With this, we would conclude today's session. Thank you, everyone, for your patient hearing, and thank you once again, sir, for your time.